we have problems is hymn 524. We're marching to Zion. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord. And thus surround the throne, and thus surround the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Let those refuse to sing who never knew our God, but children of the heavenly King, but children of the heavenly King may speak their joys abroad, may speak their joys abroad. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Then let our songs abound and every tear be dry. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground to fairer worlds on high, to fairer worlds on high. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Brother Dwayne, would you lead us in prayer? Please be seated as we continue singing hymn 516, When the Roll is Called Up Yonder. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair. When the saved of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of this resurrection share, when His chosen ones shall gather over to the northern skies, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. Hymn 515. There's a land that is fairer than day. There's a land that is fairer than day, and by faith we can see it afar, for the Father waits over the way to prepare us a dwelling place there, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore. We shall sing on that beautiful shore the melodious songs of the blessed, and our spirits shall sorrow no more. Not a sigh for the blessing of rest, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore, to our bountiful Father above we will offer a tribute of praise for the glorious gift of His love, and the blessings that hallow our days, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on the beautiful shore, in the sweet by and by we shall meet on that beautiful shore. Brother Dave Burke, would you lead us in prayer?
Amen. Well, but we are still working through that issue with the feedback on this sound system. So be patient with us as we continue to try to track that down. I thought we might have been on to something earlier, but it seems that maybe we have some more work yet to do. So please be patient with us as we try to figure out what's going on with that, and we will get that problem solved post haste or post not haste, whichever comes first or second or third. Everybody laughed at my joke this morning. What's going on? I'm tired too, guys. Well, we're going to be in Acts, believe it or not. We're going to be in Acts tonight, same as we were the last several Sundays. I believe this is actually number 90 in the messages through the book of Acts. So I do want to bring up one more time the cottage prayer meetings. That sign-up list is out there. Nobody's signed up for June yet. And I would really love to see that spot get filled. So just be praying about whether God would have you to be part of that ministry and maybe host that. Once again, feel free to use the church's resources at your disposal to host one of those as well. So thank you all for being here tonight. I know it was an early morning for most of you guys, and I appreciate you coming and being part of that breakfast celebration. I appreciate you being part of celebrating the mothers and the godly women in the church. Without you guys, we wouldn't be anywhere. So thank you once again for all that you've done for us in our lives. We're going to be in Acts chapter 23. Beginning, well, I'm gonna back it up to verse 23. I picked it up in verse 25 from the last message, but I'm gonna back up just for a little context to verse 23 and read through the end of the chapter this evening. So if you'll follow along as I read aloud. Paul sent to Felix the governor. That's the pericope in my ESV version. And then he called two of the centurions and said, "Get ready 200 soldiers with 70 horsemen and 200 spearmen to go as far as Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night. Also provide mounts for Paul to ride and bring him safely to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter to this effect. Now, remember, this is the Roman guard calling on Felix, or sending a letter to Felix, and he sends this letter to Felix. "Claudius Lysias, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them when I came upon them with the soldiers and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman citizen. And desiring to know the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their council. And I found that he was being accused about questions of their law, but charged with nothing deserving of death or imprisonment. And when it was disclosed to me that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, ordering his accusers also to state before you what they have against him. So the soldiers, according to their instructions, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipartus. And on the next day they returned to the barracks, letting the horsemen go on with him. And when they had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they presented Paul also before him. And on reading the letter, he asked what province he was from. And when he learned that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing when your accusers arrive." And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. May God add understanding and application to His word this evening. So thinking about this, we see God giving Paul another opportunity for respite. And as I think about Paul's ministry and Paul walking on these missionary journeys through the book of Acts, there's been several times that Paul has been imprisoned or trapped or stopped and basically put in a position where he could go no further. And in those times, we read in the book of Acts how Paul is always just trying to worship and lift up and exalt God in those moments and in those times. And it seems to me that those might just be times of rest that God has figured in for Paul, since Paul is probably not willing to rest unless he's forced to do so. I was talking to my wife this morning, and I didn't eat breakfast before I left the house, and I didn't eat breakfast over here. During the breakfast, I did snack quite a bit, so I was okay. It's not like I was in danger of withering away or anything. But my lovely wife came to me and she said to me, "Why don't you, even if you don't eat breakfast, why don't you make yourself a plate so that you'll have something to eat and you'll be okay for the afternoon, and that way you won't get hungry." And I just kind of looked at her and I'm like, I am kind of a grown-up. And she looked back at me and she says, and these words really touched my heart. She says, I just want to make sure you're taken care of. I want to make sure that you don't get hungry and that you're going to be okay." And I think to myself, like, how many of us get so busy that we forget to take care of ourselves? How many of us get so entangled and entrapped, kind of like Martha this morning, in the busyness and the things that we have to do, that we forget that there's a level of care that we need as well. And as I read this story, I think to myself, wow, God just like figured in for Paul some times that he could just spend in relationship with God, like only him and God together. And him growing in his relationship and his walk with Christ. And as these little parts of this story through the book of Acts, they're just peppered throughout there, and it seems like they're kind of equal divided through the book as Paul goes from here to there, and then every once in a while he just gets stopped, right? He just gets stopped, and he can't do anything else for a period of time. And God just showed me. He says sometimes He's just got to make a stop and rest and listen and be ready to take a hold of what God has for him and spend some time in concerted effort and relationship with God. You see, last time we watched God once again save Paul from those that wanted to do him harm. And tonight we're going to see a plan of God take Paul to another time of rest and peace for at least a few days as he arrives in Caesarea. So first we look at this passage and we see Claudius's letter to Felix. And one of the things that stands out to me in this passage is kind of funny because it happens multiple times through the book of Acts. Once again, Paul's Roman heritage helps him out. Because Paul was a Roman, he got favor with Claudius. What's his name? Claudius Lysias, or whatever the dude's name was. He got favor with Claudius because of his Roman heritage. And I think about that, I'm thinking, how ironic is it that one of the Jews, one of God's chosen people, the Jews, actually had kind of a Roman heritage, or at least a Roman citizenship, and that Roman citizenship actually won him favor during a lot of his missionary journeys, but yet all the while the Romans were the ones that were afflicting the Jews in so many ways. And isn't this like, isn't it kind of strange? Like, God's the only one that could do this. God's the only one that could figure out that this would work. You see, Felix used the fact that Paul was a Roman as an excuse to move the problem to the next level and move it out of his providence, move the problem away from him. In my opinion here, Claudius, he could have solved the problem. He could have just said to the Jews, y'all leave this guy alone or I'm about to put the smackdown on you. He could have done that, but he didn't want unrest in his area. He didn't want political turmoil in his area. So he took Paul because of his Roman heritage, and he used that as an excuse to send him to Caesarea, which is the next step on his trip to Rome. You see, God made Paul a Roman in order to use him the way he wanted to use him. I think about that. I wonder how difficult it was for Paul to be a Roman citizen and a Pharisee at the same time. You guys ever think about that? You guys ever think about the fact that Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees, like the Jews' Jew, if you will? Paul was like one of the top-notch Jews, and he was also a Roman, and like the Romans were afflicting the Jews, and how would the other Pharisees look upon Paul? Like, how did God get that thing? You guys ever thought about that? It's kind of difficult to parse out in your mind how God could make all this work. But the reason that Paul was a Roman, I believe with all my heart, is because God was going to use that in the ministry that God actually made Paul for. And that was this ministry. The ministry of his missionary journeys for the spread of Christianity throughout the known world. God used the fact that Paul was a Roman for that position, even though Paul must have been thinking as a Jew, as a Pharisee, how difficult it was that he was a Roman, how much that could cause him problems. And I wonder how many times he reached out to God and said, why is this affliction upon me, God? You ever done that? Like, why have you put this on me, God? Well, here's what I'll tell you. I don't know why God gives us difficulties or allows us to face afflictions or troubles. But what I do know is I serve a mighty God. And he can take anything that he puts on you and use it. He can use it in you for the glory of God and for your good. The next time you wonder why God made you where and when and how you are, just remember, it didn't make any sense for a Pharisee to be a Roman either. It didn't make any sense until it did. It wound up being a great asset to the ministry that God called Paul to. So right now, especially you young people, right now, the things about you that you don't like or you can't figure out, those things in your life that are difficult for you to ascertain right now, don't be downtrodden about those things. Rather, ask God what he's going to use them for and see how you can employ those things to spread the kingdom of God and to give glory to Christ everywhere he sends you. Because that's what they're for. Remember, God made you, I spoke this morning, God made you specifically for a reason, and everything about you is a part of God's stratagem. And that stratagem that God orchestrated every single detail of your life for a reason. And He put you where you are for a reason. And He made you like you are for a reason. You don't need to see the entire picture in order to be obedient. You just got to trust that God made you like He did for a reason. Quirks and flaws and difficulties and all. Imperfections, everything. God made you that way for a reason. You hear that, Penny? God made me this way for a reason. So Paul's Roman heritage once again helped him. And as I thought through this, I thought, wow, how weird is it that one of the most faithful Pharisees in the Jewish religion was also a Roman citizen, while all the while the Romans were persecuting the Jews. And then God called that man out of that place to become a Christian and miraculously saved him while he was on his way to throw people in prison for the very thing that he turned him into. And then He makes the fact that he was a Roman make sense in the end. Isn't that crazy? Like, any step along that path, you'd be thinking, wow, this is just weird. Until you take a look at the whole picture and you can see what God did. Now, ain't none of us have a stratagem that good. There ain't none of us that could figure that out. But God did. We see also that in this passage that Paul's Jewish heritage hindered him. Paul's Jewish heritage hurt him pretty bad. You see, I think about all of the Christians that must have been around, and the fact that Paul suffers most of the affliction is not lost on me. Like, all the Jews are coming after Paul. Why? Why? Because he was a Jewish Christian. It was because he knew the rules, he knew the laws, he was brought up in the reasoning of the Jewish faith, and he understood who God was. And what the problem was that bothered so many of the Jews was he understood it better than them, and they didn't want to change their minds. They didn't want to change their traditions. They didn't want to change the way that they had thought things were supposed to be for their whole lives. The thing that Paul took the pride in was the thing that caused him so much trouble in his ministry. You see, we see Paul explain his Jewish heritage in the book of Acts. As a matter of fact, he calls himself a Pharisee of Pharisees. He calls himself like the top notch of Pharisees, and how he knew that if the law could save you, then he would be saved for sure. He told him about that, and he took pride in the fact that he had enough faith in God to follow that culture because he thought it was the right way. But what he found out was that culture was the problem. Those that identified with that same culture caused him so much trouble, didn't they? Why? Why? Because, I'll tell you why. Because those that are trapped in sin hate the light. Because it shows their weaknesses and it shows their troubles. And nobody likes those things to be seen. But when the light shone on Paul on the road to Damascus and revealed to him where he was wrong, he was willing to change. His Jewish heritage caused him trouble. Most of all the issues that he faced were brought about by the Jews who he was trying to win to Christ for their own good. Isn't it ironic? Well, Paul, a Roman citizen, gets rescued. The Romans were no friends to Christians either, but they were pretty indifferent towards them for a good period of this time. And as you think about the fact that he was a Roman saved him from the Jews who he was trying to win to faith. He was trying to help them, and they were coming after him. It's kind of like a child that you have to correct, or you have to issue some sort of a punitive action to. Right? The act, what you do is an act of love, right? You want to correct a child when they're wrong so that they can grow up and know how to do things right and how to do things that aren't going to be harmful. And it's an act of love for the good of the child. But how many times have you seen a child, after they've received punitive action, react with, "Oh, thank you so much for teaching me that lesson"? You ever heard that? No, all y'all go like this away. That's not how they react, is it? No. You usually get a door slam or a "I hate you" or a "you're the meanest meathead that I've ever seen" or something to that effect. Why are you so hateful? Yeah, my granddaughter called me a fatty fat. Yeah, that's what happens, right? They don't want to be corrected. They don't want to be told what they're doing is wrong. And it was no different for the Jews when Paul said, "Listen, I understand that you love the God of the universe and you want to serve him. Let me show you how to serve him properly." And the Jews were like, "No, I don't want to hear that. I want to do it the way I want to do it. Don't tell me I can't do it on my own. Don't tell me I can't depend on myself. Don't tell me I need Jesus." And that's all Paul wanted them to see. The real path to salvation. You see, the reaction to that type of conversation is almost universally is not thankfulness, but it's retribution. And as much as those children have the ability to rebuff you, they will. And kids really know how to stick that knife in and dig it in, right? Especially when they get up in them teenage years, they really know how to get your goat. They can say some words and then, you guys ever watch Popeye where he gets mad and it's puffs out his ears? That's the way I felt so many times as a father to a teenage girl. They do the best that they can to rebuff anything. But before we get too sanctimonious about that, let's just remember, the last time you were corrected, how did you take it? The last time you were proven wrong, how did you react? In that situation, what did you do? What did you do? I don't know if anybody ever proves me wrong. I'll let you know. But I bet my reaction won't be much better. I bet it won't. And I bet yours wasn't either. You see, just remember, sometimes the things that we take the most pride in are the things that get in the way of being who God wants us to be. And that's usually because you idolize that part of yourself instead of using it the way God would have you to. So Paul's Roman heritage helped him, Paul's Jewish heritage hindered him, and Paul's own people hated him. Paul's own people hated him. Once again, we see here that the Jews had hatched a plot to kill him for the heinous crime of showing them who God is. Do you guys remember the plan that the Jews had hatched? Which I wonder what happened to these dudes, because the Bible doesn't go back to tell about it. But it says that 30 of them got together and were like, "We ain't eating or drinking nothing until we kill Paul." Wow, you ever made an oath like that? I'm studying through a series for the Sunday school morning Sunday school class, and Jill put this on our hearts to teach about the life of Jesus. So I'm walking through the study, and I'm thinking about the life of Jesus, and I think about all of the things that Jesus did. And I'm thinking, wow! I told Jill, I think early on, I thought this was like 6 or 7 lessons. And right now it's spiraled into about 12. So I don't know where it's going to stop. But then I think to the fact that the Bible actually says about the life of Jesus, if you could record all of what Jesus did, the world wouldn't hold the books. These guys made an oath. These guys made an oath to kill Paul or to die themselves. You know what the Bible says about making an oath? You know what the Sermon on the Mount says about making an oath? It says if you do it, you're a dummy. Don't do it. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And that's enough. These guys made an oath to kill Paul. They hated Paul so much that they couldn't stay alive if he was alive. That was basically what they said. I don't want to live if Paul lives. His own people hated him just because he wanted to show them who God was. Sometimes the hardest people to share the gospel with are those closest to you. Isn't that the case? Not saying that your family's going to try to kill you for inviting them to church. That's a little dramatic, but the principle still stands, right? The principle stands. Helping your closest confidants come to Christ is one of the most difficult things to accomplish, partly because they know all about you. That was a big struggle for me. All of my old associates and friends and family, they all knew everything about me when I came to Christ. They all knew about my checkered past, about my history, about the things that I did and the things that I said and the way that I lived. And that makes it difficult, right? You see, these Jews knew who Paul was. They were like, Paul, what's this you're talking about, man? You're the Jew of Jews. Come on, you spoke the law. You put these people in jail. You held the coats of the people that killed Stephen. Who do you think you are, Paul, to come and tell us this? You're one of us. See, they knew all about his past. They knew about things the rest of the world doesn't know. In my case, they knew me before I came to Christ. I certainly don't like to explain my past life to people who don't know me. I don't like to because I'm not proud of it. As a matter of fact, I don't do that unless there's a reason for me to do so. One of the reasons that integrity is so important in this life is because it has a huge impact on our effectiveness in ministry. Who you are from the moment Christ saves you on is important. And when we live with integrity, when we live with all integrity in our hearts to be who God wants us to be, at least from that point on, people have got nothing to say against us, right? And we can use that to build a ministry that can be effective for Christ. And that's what Paul was trying to do here. And it made his own people hate him all the more. You see, but his kinsmen, they didn't hate him because of his integrity. They hated him because he was adamant about helping them. Because he wouldn't let it go. Because of his knowledge of their dedication to what they believed. He knew that if he could bring them to Christ, that they would be warriors for the gospel. Just like he was. And he wanted to see that happen. And he wouldn't give up on it. Their dedication to what they believed to be the one true God and the one true religion. You see, they did know who the true God was. They just didn't know how to get to him. And Paul wanted to show them. And we see in this passage that whatever it costs, taking the message of God to everyone is worth it. You see, Paul had already known that he was going to go to Rome. God already told him that he was going to go to Rome. So I don't think for a moment that Paul was afraid of this angry mob that made an oath to kill him. I don't think he was worried about it in the least. But even if he was still willing to carry the gospel to the people that wanted to kill him. Church, I wonder how ready we are to carry the gospel. Even to our enemies, to the people who would wish us dead just for doing it. And then we see this respite that God gives to Paul, and we see it in a really miraculous way come and unfold in this passage. You see, Claudius gave Paul a king's guard to go to Caesarea. Didn't he? How many people went with Paul? Or how much of a protective detail did he have? According to my count, 270. 200 spearmen and 70 horsemen, right? Isn't that what it says? Secret Service ain't got nothing on these boys. Oh, Trump wishes he had 270. Claudius gives Paul an armed guard that could get him through any battlefield anywhere in the world. These were like the cream of the crop. You see, an oversized group of people got Paul out of the city. And yeah, it was in the middle of the night, but it still would have been a pretty big deal. You see, God showed up in a mighty way that would have let all of the would-be assassins know that were waiting to pounce on Paul, that Paul was protected not only by man, but by God. You see, it would have been unheard of to provide this kind of escort for anybody, much less just a normal Jewish Christian Roman citizen. Like, normal. What's normal about that? Like, even the Caesar wouldn't have been escorted like this. And Paul got this type of escort out of town. Those assassins had to look at that group of people and be like, y'all, we gonna be hungry. We about to get hungry because we can't get in there. I don't know if it was me, and I was one of those folks. I don't know about you guys. I don't like being hungry. It's not one of my favorite things to do. I've been like, no, I'm going in. They can take me out. I'm not starving to death, boys. But nobody attacked this guard, obviously. Who's going to come after 270 Roman Special Forces operators? There would be no point in using so many men to take Paul out to safety. Listen, a modestly sized guard of Roman soldiers would have done the trick. The Jews wouldn't have attacked if even Paul had been escorted by a dozen people. The Jews wouldn't have attacked because they would have been afraid of what would have happened to them. They would have been executed for their trouble. They would have left him alone if he'd had just a modest guard. But God said, no, I'm going to show up in a big way. And I'm going to show these guys who Paul is. And maybe, just maybe, I can change one of their minds. You ever wonder if God does things that way? Like, don't you think that these 30 guys that were lying in wait to kill Paul see these 270 people escorting Paul, and Paul's just sitting on this horse trotting along, happy as he can be, eating his biscuits while they're sitting over there hungry? Do you ever wonder if they were just sitting over there and they thought to themselves, maybe there's something to this Paul fellow. Maybe we ought to dig in a little bit more and find out about what he's saying. I don't know if that happened, but I sure like to think it did. I sure like to think that that's the way that the God I serve works. That even his enemies are given an opportunity to see who he is. You see, it's almost like God was saying to the Jews here, when are you going to get the point that I sent Paul and he's doing my work and you're not going to touch him until I say you can? The size of the group there that escorted Paul, it would have been the talk of the town. Even in the middle of the night, it would have been the rumor mills going around, and the plot that the Jews intended to end Paul just made people more curious about his ministry and probably led even more people to Christ. Isn't that how God works? Isn't that how God works? The things that men try to use against him, he takes and uses for good. Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that God takes the very things that people try to stop him with and make them useful for his purpose? Don't you wish you could do that? Don't you wish you could do that sometimes? I wish I could. So an oversized group got him out of the city, and then an oversized group got him, or an overtrained group got him to Felix. These were the horsemen, the 70. So the 200 spears folks went back to the city after they got safely out of town, and these 70 horsemen were what was left behind to escort Paul to Felix. Now that is an overtrained and oversized group that's got him, taking him all the way to Caesarea, whatever that next town was. There's so many. They were like, from what I understand about the history in the Roman guard, if you got a horse, you were something. You were some kind of special if you were a Roman guardsman and you got to be part of the group that rode on horses. Like, that would have been like Air Force Special Forces versus is the spear guys, and then like who's the best Special Forces? Who is it, Burke? Come on. Delta Force. Okay. These Roman soldiers on the horses were Delta Force. And the other guys were just like some Air Force pararescue dudes, you know. But these guys, this overtrained group of people continues to lead Paul, just keeping him safe. You know, Paul's chilling. Paul ain't got a worry in the world. He's got like the best of the best protecting him all the way to where he's going, to Felix. And there was a whole division of troops that led him out of town, and then the special forces stayed and escorted him all the way to Felix. I wonder how Paul felt being protected by the best of the best on his way to possibly jail. How did he feel? Well, here's what I think. Paul's looking around and thinking, wow, what a waste. Because the God I serve won't let anybody touch me until it's time. Like, I wasn't worried, guys. You didn't all have to come. I would have made it just fine on my own. Because God said, I got to go to Rome. So to Rome, I'm going to go. I'm going to go there. Because God said I was. I wonder how he felt, though. See, Paul, if I read through the book of Acts correctly, and I try to surmise Paul's mindset and the way that he sees the world as he's being escorted through his missionary journeys by God, I've never seen Paul fear for his safety. And at this point, it's pretty clear why. Because Paul trusts God. Church, I wonder how different our lives would look if we trusted God like Paul does. I wonder how much more we could accomplish if we trusted God like Paul does. Can you imagine? You see, he recognized God's a mighty God. You know, sometimes he uses miracles that we don't even recognize as miracles to get the job done. I suppose there probably wasn't anything miraculous about the fact that 270 men were escorting one lowly citizen out of town on to the next government official to be tried. But dadgummit, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. So was it miraculous? Yeah, I think it was. I think God showed up to show not only Paul that he still had his back, but to show everybody that wanted to fight Paul that there is a God in Israel. And that there is a God that takes care of the people that fight for him. You see, God wanted Paul to be relaxed and at peace with the situation on the way to Felix. And God made sure that Paul didn't have anything to worry about on the way. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm just looking at this wrong. But this passage, in my opinion, is like God telling Paul another time, no worries, son, I got your back. Carry on. I got more work for you to do, but now you need some rest. Enjoy your vacation. That's what it seems like to me. Let's think about this. Every time Paul goes from place to place, he doesn't spend any time resting or gathering resources. He goes straight into gospel ministry. Every time he never stops to take care of himself. He never stops for rest. He only pursues the gospel, no matter what. And church, let me tell you something. God didn't make these meat bags able to operate without rest. God knows we need rest. And he showed it to Paul because not only did an oversized group get him out of the city and an overtrained group get him to Felix, but an oversized God gave Paul some rest. When it seems like there's nowhere else to turn, God shows up. When it seems like there's no way out, God shows up. When it seems like there's nothing left that we can do, God shows up. Paul was always working and pursuing what God wanted him to pursue. So he gets to Felix, right? He shows up to Felix this trip. He's munching on his crackers and riding on his horse on the way to Felix, chilling out, enjoying the ride. He gets to Felix and Felix says to Paul, "So what's up?" And Paul's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'm just here for the money, bro." And then Felix is like, "Well, who's after you? What's going on?" And then Felix reads the letter, and Felix is like, "Well, Paul, just hang out over here. And what I'm going to do is provide an opportunity for your accusers to come, but hang out over here until I can sort this out. I'll give you a chance to explain your side of the story." So as we find out in the next part of this passage, in the next chapter, for 5 days, Paul gets to be a guest of the finest establishment in Caesarea. That's what it says, right? And he commanded him to be guarded in Herod's praetorium. Do you know what Herod's praetorium was? It was basically the ruler or the governor or the leader's mansion of that city. You know, I don't think Paul was allowed to leave. But it wasn't jail. It's funny to me, this group of 30 people wanted to get Paul and kill him, so they made an oath to kill him. And because of that oath, Paul's nephew runs and tells the guard where Paul's being kept in prison. Paul goes from prison to Claudius. Paul goes from prison to Claudius, and Claudius is like, "Yo, Paul, these people are trying to kill you. I got to get you out of the city. I'm going to provide you with the largest guard of people you've ever known, you've ever seen, to get you over to Felix, because I'm going to let Felix handle this because you're from Cecilia," whatever that city was he was from, and that's where Felix is the governor over, so let's get you into his jurisdiction, let him handle it. And he gets there, and Felix is like, "Well, bro, hang out in the governor's mansion." He came from prison to the governor's mansion because some Jews tried to kill him. What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. You see, Paul started his life as a Christian, and he lived it with the same fervor that he did as a Pharisee. And he pursued the work of Jesus just as vigorously as he pursued the work of the synagogue. Because that's who Paul was. I don't think it's the first time that God forced a sabbatical on Paul. Paul spent time in prison. Paul spent time, he spent time snake bit. You know what? Once Paul had to die to get some rest. But God brought him back. And what did he do as soon as he came back? He's like, "Thanks for the rest, God. Back to town. Time to preach." It's not the first time that God gave Paul a sabbatical. But dadgummit, it was a pretty miraculous time. It was a pretty neat thing that God did in the life of Paul. You see, how much trust do you have to have in God to be praising God while you're sitting in jail? Even God's most faithful followers need a break sometimes. And I think that's what God showed Paul. Make sure that you listen to God when he tells you to rest. Make sure that you listen to God when he says take a break. Because I'd hate for him to have to put you in jail so that you could take a rest. Or I'd hate for him to have to get you stoned to death so that you could take a rest. Just listen to God. Rest when he says to rest. I know you guys are saying right now, I'm tired right now. If you'd quit preaching, I'd go rest. So let me close with this. God knows his people need rest and reprieve. Don't get discouraged if you feel like you're exhausted and you can't go on. Let God give you some rest and rejuvenation so that you can continue in the work that he has for you in the long term. If you wear yourself out completely, that's going to render you useless to God. And Paul had to be made by God to rest. Don't make God put you in jail so that you can rest. Just listen when he tells you it's time and take the rest that he gives you and thank him for it. I love you guys. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to stand before you once again. We'll be picking it up in chapter 24 of the book of Acts in hopefully next Sunday night, Lord willing. And hope to see you all back then. And for our midweek service at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, come be part of our prayer service and our youth gathering as well. Anything we need to announce before we close tonight? All right. Kelly, would you close us, please, sir?